Welcome back to Courage Zone, episode 13. My name is Sergio, and I am your host. Before I get started with this week's episode, here's my disclaimer. This podcast may discuss sensitive topics, including CSA, so listener discretion is advised. This podcast discusses experiences of abuse, violence, suicidal ideation, and CSA, which may be distressing to some listeners. The content provided is for informational and educational purposes only, and it is not, I repeat, not a substitute for professional advice. So if you or someone you know needs support, please seek help from a qualified professional or contact your local helpline in your area. Now on to episode 13. I thought this week I would cover a little bit of healing. Once again, actually, I know I've discussed this before, but I thought I would go over a few other things. In healing from childhood sexual abuse, which as survivors, we all know that this is a journey of courage and resilience. So CSA is a deeply traumatic experience that can have profound and long-lasting effects on survivors. The journey to healing from such trauma is often complex, challenging, and deeply personal. I will explore the process of healing from CSA, including the psychological impact of the abuse, common barriers to healing, and strategies for coping and recovery. So the first part I want to cover is the understanding of the impact of childhood sexual abuse. CSA refers to any sexual activity that occurs between a child and an adult or an older child. It could take many forms, including molestation, rape, incest, and exploitation. Regardless of these specific circumstances, CSA can have devastating effects on survivors, both in childhood and throughout their lives. One of the most significant impacts of CSA is the psychological trauma it inflicts. Survivors may experience a range of emotions, including shame, guilt, anger, fear, and confusion. They may struggle with feelings of worthlessness and self-blame, believing that they somehow provoked or deserve the abuse. These feelings can be heightened by social attitudes that stigmatize survivors and minimize the seriousness of the experience. In addition to the emotional toll, CSA can also have long-term effects on survivors' mental health and well-being. Studies have shown that CSA are at increased risks for depression, anxiety, PTSD, otherwise known as post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse, eating disorders, and suicidal ideation. They may also struggle with intimacy and trust in relationships, finding it difficult to establish healthy boundaries or form meaningful connections with others. Barriers to healing. What are those barriers to healing? Well, healing from CSA is not easy. It hasn't been easy for me through this long and extensive journey, and survivors often face numerous barriers along the way. I know I have. One of the biggest challenges is the stigma and the shame associated with sexual abuse, which can make it difficult for survivors to speak out about their experiences and seek help. So many survivors fear being blamed, judged, ostracized, and if they disclose their abuse, leading them to suffer in silence. Speaking from personal experience, I know that the second person that I mentioned it to or told that I was a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, it was a person that I was dating, and she turned around and said, "Well, I can't date you. I can't have you doing that to our children." That was devastating to me because I had done nothing to deserve that sort of statement. I had done nothing at all, and all of a sudden this one person just immediately became judge and jury and convicted me for the rest of my life. I must admit that, it did put me down quite a bit, but here I am. Another barrier to healing is the trauma itself, which can manifest in a variety of ways, including flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance, and disassociation. These symptoms can be overwhelming and debilitating, making it difficult for survivors to engage in therapy or other forms of treatment. Once again, personal experience. I've had those flashbacks, the nightmares, hypervigilance. I'm that all the time. And the disassociation for me was when I was a younger boy in my teens. I often did that, especially when, let's call it, the trauma was happening. I often disassociated and I pretended to be somewhere else, or I saw my own self being molested while I was just moving on, seeing things, or just not being in that place where things were happening. Furthermore, the effects of CSA are not limited to the individual survivor. They could also impact family of dynamics, interpersonal relationships, and social functioning. Survivors may struggle with feelings of alienation and disconnection from loved ones, who may have difficulty understanding or supporting them. This lack of support can further isolate survivors and hinder their ability to heal. Well, once again, personal experience. I've never had the support of my family, and I'm talking my immediate family. That's the reason why I just don't speak to any of them. If I'm not going to have the support, I'm not going to have them in my life. And I decided a long time ago that I was only going to have positive people in my life who can improve me as an individual. So I know how all that affects me. I say that, for the most part, yeah, I'm okay, but that's the best and easiest way to just shrug things off and, as people would say, move on. I sometimes think that people are just tired of hearing that, yeah, I'm a survivor of CSA. Yeah, okay, yeah, you are. Move on. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Well, unfortunately, that title will never go away. That title is on my forehead. And whether you care to see it or not, that's up to you. But I know I see it. And I am a survivor. Despite the challenges, though, healing from CSA is possible. And there are many strategies that survivors can employ to cope with their trauma and reclaim their lives. One of the most important steps is to seek professional help from a therapist or counselor who specializes in trauma and abuse. I want to stop there because, there's a difference between a psychiatrist, a therapist, or a counselor. They're vastly different. And most people think that, well, go talk to a psychiatrist. Yeah, psychiatrists, you can talk to them. I'm not putting them down. They are professionals, and they know what they're doing to a certain degree. I've gone through a couple of psychiatrists, which, you talk about your issue, and they just listen, and then a prescription for medication, which I didn't find at the end of I call it the end of the day, I didn't find it very helpful because the medication just numbed me. As far as a therapist is concerned, I have a therapist now who is extremely good. He has a lot of experience dealing with trauma, and not just, let's call it being a survivor of CSA type of trauma, but various types of trauma. And he is extremely good. A counselor, well, I don't know how much experience a counselor would have when it comes to trauma of abuse. And so I guess you just have to do your homework with these individuals, and interview them before you start getting into the nitty-gritty. Once again, therapy can provide a safe and supportive space for survivors to process their experience, explore their emotions, and develop coping skills for managing triggers and symptoms. In addition to therapy, survivors may also find solace in connecting with other survivors through support groups or online forums. Sharing experiences with others who have walked a similar path can provide validation, empathy, and a sense of community. It can also help survivors realize that they are not alone and that healing is possible. When it comes to that, and making a joining a support group or an online forum, I personally have never joined an online forums, but support groups, yeah, definitely. And I speak very highly of the Gatehouse. They have many types of support groups, and we meet weekly when it comes to certain sessions that they have what they call phase 1 and phase 2. There are 15 weeks of sessions, and they are extremely experienced in this particular area, and they've been extremely helpful. They have thousands and thousands of people that have come through the Gatehouse and continue to speak very highly of this place with regards to being a very large support group. And it's not just the individuals that work there, but the facilitators and the people themselves that are in the support groups. They themselves become people that continue that going forward, that's just paying it forward and being that supportive to other survivors who are just starting to come in. It's extremely, it's hard to explain. The next is self-care is another essential aspect of healing from CSA. So survivors should prioritize their physical, emotional, and mental well-being by engaging in activities that promote relaxation, self-expression, and self-compassion. This might include exercises, meditation, creative pursuits, spending time in nature, or engaging in hobbies and interests that bring joy and fulfillment. I personally, and since Christmas, have taken up a new hobby. It's called metal detecting. And I've joined a few groups on Facebook, which are been very helpful to meet up with other people. And, we all hang out and try to find things, trying to hide that buried treasure. I have found a few things, nothing to write home about, but still, it's the adventure, it's the experience, it's the fresh air. It is also important for survivors to establish healthy boundaries and advocate for their needs in relationships and social interactions. This may involve settling limits with friends or family members who are unsupportive or triggering, as well as learning to say no to activities or commitments that feel overwhelming or draining. Lastly, survivors should remember that healing is a journey, not a destination. It takes time, patience, and courage to confront the trauma of CSA and rebuild one's life in the aftermath. There will be ups and downs along the way, but with perseverance and support, survivors can emerge stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. In conclusion, healing from CSA is a deeply personal and transformative journey that requires courage, resilience, self-compassion, and despite the challenges and barriers that survivors may face, it is possible to reclaim one's life and find peace and healing in the aftermath of trauma. By seeking help, connecting with others, practicing self-care, honoring their own resilience, survivors can move forward on the path of recovery and reclaim the sense of safety, dignity, and empowerment that was stolen from them. Now, the reason that I wanted to cover this particular topic is I was away this past weekend, and it was a family gathering, let's call it. I don't want to get into personal details, but unfortunately, I had what they call the cockroaches coming out of the woodwork. And I'm not going to put names on people and so on and so forth, but it ruined one of my days. It totally did. I had severe anxiety, minor chest pains from potentially having a panic attack. My stomach was just churning and turning it upside down. It just ruined my day. And thank God I had my wife near me and beside me all the time on this particular day. And I think that's what people need who are survivors of CSA. It's just somebody that strong that can say, I'm here for you and let's do this together. By the end of the evening, I was a lot better. The anxiety had dropped, minor chest pain had gone away. Not only had my wife, but I basically had my best friend, my brother, who I have him and his wife on speed dial. And let's face it, they're always there for me. Those three people, they're always there for me. So if I'm going through a rough period or through a rough patch, I know the three people that I can count on. And they're, like I said, they're just a speed dial away. I have others as well, don't get me wrong. But being that, these two individuals plus my wife, they're the closest thing where I live. So that's just who I reach out to. And, these, when the cockroaches come out, just when you think you're making a headway, whether it be one step forward or two step forward, and all of a sudden it just smacks you in the face and it just drops you back 10 paces. Or, as I put it, 10 blocks. It was difficult that day. It was very difficult that day when especially they mentioned that, they listened to my podcast and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, I just don't give a crap of who they listen to, what they listen, and whatever. They're not part of my family anymore. I've refused to acknowledge them as being part of my family because they're not. Sometimes I often think that, I should have just been able to pick my own family because the people that were chosen for me are just the total pieces of shit. And I cannot stand any of them. I've tried to extend over the years, extend a hand to try to mend the fences, bridge the gaps. And no. It's just when you think that, hey, I think I'm making headway here. No, it just keeps going back. So I'm tired of it all. I just want, that aspect to just for these people just go away and stay away because I don't want any part of them at all. And I don't know what makes them think that, today is it just me, or do these people just wake up one morning and go, hey, you know what, today I think I'm going to disturb the living shit out of this person. Don't. If you think that, don't. Go away. You are not part of the solution. You are part of the problem. And so, at the end of the day, words are words and words are empty unless they're backed up by actions and positive actions and display of affection that are positive, not negative. So that's the reason I did this, because I was going through a very difficult time this past weekend. I shouldn't say the whole weekend, just one particular day. And so I'm glad I came out of it with the help of 3 people. But I'm sure not everybody has 3 people or 2 or even 1, because sometimes we stand alone and the only person that we can depend on is ourselves. And we, as survivors of childhood sexual abuse, believe it or not, we're the strongest things on this earth. I'm sure there are the others that's just as strong, but I'm just speaking from my own personal experience of the things that I've gone through, the things I have lived through, the abuse that I have lived through, everything. At the end of the day, I'm still here, I'm still standing, and I'm still fighting. And no one, except for the man above, is going to stop me from continuing to move forward. Thank you for listening. So, as we come to the end of today's episode, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to each of you for joining me on this important conversation about healing of childhood sexual abuse in the various areas. It is not an easy topic to discuss. It never has been for me. I know it sounds like it is, but it isn't. But the shedding light on these issues, we take a step forward, healing and understanding. So to all the survivors out there listening, your strength and your resilience inspires me all the time. So remember, you're not alone. I'm here for you. And I know other people as well that will be here for you. And so again, you're not alone. And I hope there is healing for you. So let's continue to support each other and uplift each other as we navigate our individual journeys. Thank you for lending me your ears and hearts today. And until next time, take gentle care of yourselves.